The call to battle. The mysterious signal. In the vast, silent void of space, the Vanguard drifted through the endless darkness. Its hull was scarred from previous battles, the wear of years of conflict etched into every corner of the ship. The crew had grown used to the quiet, too used to it. No one expected to hear anything that day. Commander Ethan Ward stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars, his mind heavy with the weight of the universe's troubles. The galaxy had been at peace for the past few months, but peace often meant waiting for the next storm. And storms always came. He had lived through enough of them to know that. As he walked across the command deck, the usual hum of the ship's engines was interrupted by a strange beep. Ward's head snapped toward the communication panel, where the officer in charge of signals was working furiously to decipher the strange transmission. "Sir," the officer said, his voice tense, "we're receiving a signal. It's not from any known source." Ward's brows furrowed. "What do you mean, not from any known source?" "It's a distress signal, but it's not like any we've ever received before. It's encrypted, coded, and it's coming from the Zorian Dominion sector." A chill ran down Ward's spine. The Zorian Dominion. The name alone sent shivers through his crew. The Empire had swept across the galaxy, consuming world after world with ruthless efficiency. No one had dared to challenge them for decades, and yet here was a signal, coming from the heart of their territory. "Can you track it?" Ward asked, his voice steady despite the rising tension in his chest. The officer nodded, working quickly to establish a secure connection. After a few moments of silence, the signal came through clearly, though its words were muffled and strange. The voice was distorted, but Ward could hear the urgency in the tone. It was a cry for help. "Help. Planet. Zorian fleet. They're coming. Too many. Too unstoppable. Please. Must warn." The message ended abruptly, leaving a stunned silence across the bridge. Ward's mind raced. The Zorian fleet was vast, untouchable. No one had ever managed to stand against them for long. A small part of him wanted to ignore the message, to leave the Empire to their destruction. But he knew that the Vanguard was different. They weren't like the other forces that had fallen before the might of the Empire. Who would send a distress signal like that? Ward muttered. "What kind of person would risk their life to send a message to us?" The officer looked up, his face pale. "Maybe someone who's desperate, someone who knows they're about to lose everything." Ward's fists clenched. There was no doubt in his mind now. This was no ordinary message. It was a plea from someone who knew exactly what was coming. The Zorian fleet was on the move, and they weren't going to stop until every world in their path was destroyed. "I need answers," Ward said, his voice cold. "Find the source of that signal. We're going to investigate." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but they all knew what had to be done. No one could ignore a call for help from an unknown world. If the Zorian fleet was truly on the move, there was no time to waste. The Vanguard's engines hummed to life as the ship changed course, heading toward the heart of the Zorian Dominion. The crew was tense, but Ward's confidence carried them forward. They had faced impossible odds before and survived. They would do it again. But as the ship moved closer to the source of the signal, Ward couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The Zorian Dominion had no reason to send a distress signal, unless something had gone terribly wrong. The Vanguard pushed deeper into enemy territory. As the stars began to blur into streaks of light, the ship's sensors picked up something strange. The fleet was silent. Too silent. No usual chatter filled the airwaves. No warning signals. No signs of patrols. It was as if the entire Empire was waiting for something. Or perhaps someone. Commander Ward's stomach churned. Something was wrong. He could feel it. He had seen it before. An enemy pretending to be weak, hoping to lure in a target. He wasn't going to make that mistake. But there was no turning back now. He had to find out what was happening, even if it meant risking everything. Then, another message came through. this one clearer and more urgent than the first. "Captain, please, you have to get here fast. They're coming. The Empire's fleet is too powerful. They will destroy everything." Ward's eyes narrowed. This was no longer just a distress signal. It was a warning. And it was a warning he couldn't ignore. As the Vanguard neared the coordinates of the distress call, the crew braced themselves. The fate of the galaxy could very well depend on what they would find there. But Ward had a single thought in his mind as the stars stretched out before them. The Empire may be vast, but he was determined to find a way to fight back. And if that meant standing alone against an unstoppable force, then that's what he would do. The battle for the galaxy had begun. The Saurian Dominion's arrival. The Vanguard continued its journey into the heart of the Saurian Dominion's territory, the weight of the mission pressing down on every crew member. The silence of space was now filled with anticipation. Commander Ward stood at the front of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the view of space ahead. The stars streaked past them, and the hum of the ship's engines was the only sound. As they neared the planet from which the distress signal had originated, the crew began to notice something strange. There were no signs of enemy ships, no patrols, no defensive stations. It was as if the entire system had been abandoned. Yet the Vanguard had to keep moving forward. The signal had come from this system, and they needed answers. "Bring up the planet on the main screen," Ward ordered. The tactical officer quickly complied, and a holographic image of the planet appeared. It was a small, peaceful world, lush forests, vast oceans, and a population that had once lived in harmony. But now the planet was shrouded in an eerie calm, as if it were a mere shell of what it used to be. "There's nothing," said Lieutenant Harper, the ship's communications officer. "No activity. It's like the entire planet is in a state of suspended animation." Ward couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He felt it deep in his gut, the cold, unsettling sensation that this was all part of a larger trap. But he had no choice. His crew was depending on him, and the people of the planet needed help. "Keep the scanners running. Find any signs of enemy activity," Ward commanded. "We need to know what we're walking into." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the crew worked tirelessly to uncover any information. Finally, the silence was broken. A single, small signal appeared on their radar. It was faint, but unmistakable. "There, a Saurian warship," reported Lieutenant Kelly, the ship's sensor officer. "It's not large, but it's still within range. Looks like a scout ship, possibly waiting for backup." Ward's eyes narrowed. "Set course for the warship. We'll take it out before it can alert the rest of the fleet." The Vanguard adjusted its course, quietly closing in on the Saurian ship. Ward's mind raced. He knew that taking on the Saurian fleet would be a battle like no other. They were ruthless, well-organized, and far better equipped. But Ward believed in his crew. They had proven themselves time and time again. As the Vanguard neared the enemy ship, a calm voice crackled over the comms. It was the Saurian scout. "You are entering Saurian Dominion space," a cold voice warned. "You will be destroyed." Ward didn't flinch. He had faced this type of arrogance before. The Saurian Dominion had always underestimated humanity, and that was their mistake. "We'll see about that," Ward muttered under his breath. "Prepare for attack." The Vanguard moved swiftly, closing the gap between the two ships. Ward had the advantage of speed and maneuverability, but the Saurian ship had its own strengths. The battle would be a test of tactics, and Ward knew that a direct fight wasn't the best option. "Target their engines," Ward ordered. "Disable them, but don't destroy the ship. We need to know more about the fleet." The crew worked in perfect sync, as if they had been fighting together for years, even though they had only recently come together. The Vanguard unleashed a precise volley of energy blasts, striking the Saurian scout's engine core. The enemy ship's engines flared and sputtered, its movements slowing as the Vanguard's weapons caused critical damage. The Saurian warship attempted to flee, but it was too late. The Vanguard was on them, and the small scout ship was completely at their mercy. Within moments, it came to a halt, its engines completely disabled. "We've got them," Lieutenant Kelly reported. Ward's face remained stoic. He knew this was only the beginning. Taking down a single scout ship wasn't a victory. It was simply a way to gather information. He ordered the crew to board the ship and capture any survivors. They needed answers, and quickly. As the boarding team moved in, Ward remained at the helm, his mind racing. What were the Jorian fleet's intentions? Why had they sent a single, vulnerable ship into enemy space? And why had the planet's distress signal come so mysteriously, without warning? Just as he prepared to make contact with the boarding team, a new message crackled through the comms, and Ward's heart skipped a beat. "Commander Ward, they know. They know you're here." The voice was frantic, distorted. "The full fleet is coming. They're already preparing to launch." Ward's eyes widened. The enemy was more prepared than he thought. He knew they had to act fast. The Jorian fleet was about to make its move, and if the Vanguard didn't do something now, they would be overrun. "The fleet is on its way," Ward said, turning to his crew. "We have to hit them hard and fast. Prepare for the biggest battle of our lives." The Vanguard turned, its weapons at the ready. The battle for survival had just begun. The first strike. The Vanguard's engines roared to life as it sped away from the disabled Jorian scout ship. Commander Ward's mind was focused, calculating, anticipating. The crew had just received a wake-up call. The Jorian fleet, far larger and more powerful than they had anticipated, was on its way. Their only chance now was to strike first, to keep the enemy on its heels, and to create confusion before the full force of the Jorian fleet arrived. The crew moved swiftly, working together with precision. Ward knew this wasn't going to be easy. The Vanguard was a formidable warship, but it was small compared to the Jorian battle cruisers. Its greatest strength lay in its speed and stealth. It could hit hard and vanish before the enemy knew what hit them. But if they made one wrong move, they would be crushed under the weight of the Jorian fleet. "Bring up their fleet's formation on the main screen," Ward ordered, his voice calm, but with an edge of determination. Lieutenant Kelly's fingers flew over the control panel, and a holographic map of the Jorian fleet appeared before them. It was a massive array of ships, destroyers, battle cruisers, and heavy carriers, all converging on the planet. The Jorian fleet was a monster, and they had no idea that a small human warship was stalking them in the shadows. "We're going to hit their supply line," Ward said, eyes scanning the fleet's formation. "There's a cluster of cargo ships here, at the rear of the fleet. They'll be the least guarded. If we take them out, we cripple their supply chain and force them to retreat." The crew nodded in unison. They had no choice but to take this risk. If the Vanguard wasn't able to strike hard and fast, the Jorian fleet would overwhelm them. Ward turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare the main cannon and load the secondary charges. We're going for precision. One shot, one kill. I don't want any surprises." The officer nodded, focusing on the task ahead. The tension in the air was palpable. The Vanguard was approaching the enemy's supply line, its sensors active, scanning for any sign of movement. "Everything's green, Commander," Lieutenant Kelly reported. "We're in range." Ward's mind raced. This was it. The first strike would set the tone for everything to come. He gripped the armrests of his chair, feeling the ship hum beneath him, the anticipation building. Fire. The Vanguard's main cannon fired in a single blinding flash. The energy blast shot out into the cold vacuum of space, striking one of the cargo ships squarely in its engine core. The enemy ship erupted in a fiery explosion, sending debris scattering in all directions. "Target destroyed," the weapons officer reported. Ward didn't hesitate. "Again, move us in for another strike." The Vanguard darted forward, its advanced engines allowing it to close the gap between them and the next target in seconds. The Jorian fleet, still unaware of the human warship's presence, continued to move in formation. But Ward knew that their time was limited. The longer they took, the more likely the fleet would catch on. Another quick strike followed, and another Jorian cargo ship was torn apart by the Vanguard's main cannon. This time, the explosion was larger, a chain reaction as several smaller ships in the vicinity went up in flames. "We've created a breach in their supply line," Ward said, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. "Keep it up." The crew's energy surged. They could feel the power of their strikes. They weren't just attacking a fleet. They were shaking the foundation of the Zorian Empire's confidence. These were the first blows against a seemingly invincible enemy, and they had landed. But as the Vanguard moved to strike again, a sudden alert went off across the ship. "Enemy ship approaching." Lieutenant Kelly shouted. "It's a Jorian destroyer. They've spotted us." Ward's heart skipped a beat. He had been counting on the element of surprise to get them in and out before the fleet could react. But now, the plan was in jeopardy. The Vanguard was fast, but not fast enough to outrun a full-on Jorian destroyer. "Take evasive action," Ward ordered. "Get us out of here. Now." The Vanguard veered sharply to the left, the ship's engines roaring as it tried to escape the oncoming Jorian warship. But the destroyer was closing fast, its weapons powered up, and Ward could see the flickering red lights of its targeting system locking onto them. "Shields up," Ward barked. "Prepare for incoming fire." The first volley of Jorian energy blasts hit the Vanguard's shields with a violent force, sending a shockwave through the ship. The crew staggered, but the ship held steady. Ward gritted his teeth, his mind working fast. He needed to create a diversion. "Target their weapons system," he commanded. "We disable their guns, and then we're out of here." The Vanguard returned fire, narrowly dodging another wave of energy blasts as it adjusted its trajectory. The ship's weapons fired with deadly accuracy, striking the Jorian destroyer's weapons array. The enemy ship's guns exploded in a massive burst of light, temporarily disabling them. Ward didn't waste a second. "Engage full thrusters. Take us back to the edge of the fleet's range." The Vanguard surged forward, the destroyer's crippled weapons no longer a threat. The crew watched as the Jorian ship tried to regain control, but the damage was too much. The Vanguard had struck quickly, decisively, and now they were escaping with their mission complete. "We've made our point," Ward said, allowing himself a moment of relief. "Now let's get out of here before the rest of the fleet realizes what's happening." As the Vanguard hurtled through space, the crew let out a collective breath. They had made their first strike, and they had survived. But Ward knew this was just the beginning. The Jorian fleet was massive, and they would come for them with everything they had. The war was just beginning, and the Vanguard was ready to keep fighting. The turning point. The Vanguard sped through the stars, leaving behind the burning wreckage of the Jorian supply ships. The crew was exhilarated by their success, but Commander Ward knew the battle was far from over. They had made their mark, yes, but they had also drawn the attention of the entire Jorian fleet. Every moment they spent in enemy territory was another step closer to disaster. They couldn't afford to relax. "Stay alert," Ward commanded, his voice sharp as ever. "We've made the first move, but the real fight is about to begin." The crew acknowledged the order, their faces serious. Everyone knew the stakes now. They had drawn blood, but the Jorian Dominion would not forget what had happened today. The Empire would retaliate, and when they did, it wouldn't be small skirmishes. It would be an all-out war. As the Vanguard moved deeper into enemy space, Ward observed the fleet's movements. He could see the Jorian ships shifting formations, reacting to the chaos they had caused. They were no longer acting like a unified force. Their desperation was showing. That gave Ward hope. If they could break the Empire's coordination, it might give them the upper hand. "Commander," Lieutenant Kelly called, her voice tense. "I'm picking up an unusual signal. It's faint, but I think it's a Jorian command ship. It's on a direct course for us." Ward's stomach tightened. The Jorian command ship was one of the most powerful warships in the entire fleet, a massive dreadnought capable of wiping out entire fleets with a single barrage. If they didn't act fast, the Vanguard would be destroyed before it even had a chance to make its next move. Plot a course to intercept, Ward ordered, his mind already racing through strategies. We're going to take it out. If we hit their command ship, we'll throw the entire fleet into chaos. The crew responded with sharp nods. The Vanguard turned toward the incoming threat, moving swiftly through the void of space. Ward knew the odds were against them. They were going up against a ship designed to command, not fight. Well armored, heavily armed, and with an entire fleet ready to back it up. But Ward also knew something the Jorian commanders didn't. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's resolve to fight, even against impossible odds. "We've got this," Ward muttered to himself as the ship closed in on the enemy dreadnought. "Just one shot, and we take out their nerve center." The Jorian command ship came into view, its enormous frame dwarfing the Vanguard as they neared. Ward's heart beat faster as he issued the order to fire. Every second counted. The Vanguard had to strike fast and hard. "Fire," he commanded. The Vanguard's main cannon charged up and released a powerful blast. The beam shot through space, striking the Jorian command ship dead center. For a moment, everything went silent. The Vanguard's crew held their breath as the explosion erupted, a blinding flash of light that lit up the void. The shockwave from the blast shook the Vanguard, but Ward held his ground, watching the destruction unfold. The Jorian ship's shields flickered, and for a moment, it seemed like the blast might have just been a warning shot. But as the dust cleared, the command ship's hull was torn open, the massive ship losing all power. The bridge of the enemy vessel went dark. The mighty dreadnought had been crippled. "We did it," Lieutenant Harper shouted, a grin breaking across his face. Ward didn't smile. He knew better than to celebrate too early. The command ship had been crippled, yes, but that was only the beginning. The Jorian fleet was already reeling from the loss, but it wouldn't take them long to regroup and retaliate. "We've made a dent," Ward said, his voice steady. "But they won't stop. Prepare for their counterattack. We have to stay one step ahead." The Vanguard immediately adjusted its course, retreating to a safer distance. But Ward's mind was already working on the next move. The battle was no longer just about surviving. It was about crippling the Jorian fleet as much as possible before they could recover. As the Vanguard moved into hiding, Ward's eyes narrowed. The turning point had arrived. They had struck the Jorian fleet's heart, but the real challenge was just beginning. The Vanguard had made it clear that humanity wasn't just a footnote in the galaxy's history. They were here to stay. "Get ready," Ward said. "We've only just begun to show them what we're made of." In the distance, the remnants of the Jorian command ship drifted, its once proud hull now a symbol of humanity's defiance. The Vanguard had made its stand, and the Jorian Dominion would never forget it. The war had only just begun, but one thing was certain. The tide was turning, and humanity would not go down without a fight. The Jorian counterattack. The Vanguard drifted silently in the shadows of space, the remnants of the Jorian command ship still flickering on the distant horizon. Commander Ward stood on the bridge, his expression grim. The mission had been a success in terms of sending a powerful message, but he knew the Jorian Dominion wouldn't take this blow lying down. They would regroup, and when they did, they would come at them with everything they had. "Report," Ward said, his voice cold and commanding. Lieutenant Kelly, the ship's sensor officer, was the first to speak. "We've picked up Jorian fleet activity. They've begun to form a new formation. It's larger than before, and it's moving toward our location. Looks like they've dispatched their flagship, Titanus." Ward's heart skipped a beat. The Titanus was one of the largest, most powerful warships in the Jorian fleet. Its massive size and advanced weaponry made it nearly invincible, and it served as the nerve center for their entire fleet. If they were sending the Titanus after the Vanguard, it meant they were taking the human threat seriously. "The Titanus, of course," Ward muttered, a grim smile crossing his face. "They wouldn't send anything less. How long until it's in range? Ward asked, his mind already calculating their options. 30 minutes, Commander, Kelly responded. And they're bringing a full fleet with them. If we don't act fast, we'll be surrounded. Ward's mind raced. This was exactly what he had feared. The Jorian Dominion wasn't just a force of nature. They were relentless, adapting to every move humanity made. They wouldn't be fooled again. If the Vanguard didn't act now, they would be overwhelmed. Set course for the edge of the system. We need to buy some time. Engage the stealth mode, Ward ordered. We'll take them on one ship at a time if we have to. The crew quickly moved to carry out the orders. The Vanguard's stealth technology engaged, cloaking the ship from the prying sensors of the oncoming fleet. But Ward knew the stealth would only buy them a few precious moments. They couldn't hide forever. As the Vanguard neared the edge of the system, Ward gave one final order. Target their weaker ships first. We need to cripple their support vessels. Without them, the Titanus will be isolated. Lieutenant Harper, the weapons officer, nodded sharply. Aye, Commander. Weapons ready. The Vanguard maneuvered silently, moving like a ghost through the darkness of space. The Jorian fleet, unaware of the Vanguard's presence, continued to move toward the system's inner planets. They were within striking distance now. Ward's plan was risky. But if it worked, it would give them the upper hand. The first strike came fast and decisive. The Vanguard emerged from the shadows, its cannons firing with deadly precision. The first Jorian destroyer didn't even have time to react. The blast tore through its shields and struck the heart of the vessel, causing a massive explosion. Within seconds, the ship was a floating wreck in space. Target their next support ship, Ward commanded, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Another quick volley, and another Jorian ship was disabled. The Vanguard darted back into stealth mode, disappearing into the dark void before the enemy could even figure out where the attack had come from. 2 ships down, Kelly reported. But the Titanus is locking onto us. They've detected our location. Ward's eyes narrowed. They had only a few moments before the Titanus would engage its full might. The Vanguard had done damage, but the real fight was about to begin. He didn't have the luxury of taking things slowly anymore. Prepare for the Titanus, Ward ordered. All hands, brace for impact. We can't outrun them. We'll have to face them head-on. The Vanguard came out of stealth mode, and Ward could see the massive shadow of the Titanus moving into view. The enemy flagship loomed large, a gargantuan warship bristling with weapons. Behind it, the rest of the fleet was closing in. Commander, we can't take this ship head-on, Lieutenant Harper said, his voice strained. The Titanus is too heavily armored. We'll be torn apart before we even get close. Ward's mind raced. They needed a plan, and they needed it now. Take us in close, he ordered. We need to get under their radar. We'll aim for their lower hull, their weakest spot. The crew scrambled to adjust their strategy, working together to execute Ward's plan. The Vanguard closed in on the Titanus, dodging laser fire as it moved beneath the massive warship. It was a dangerous maneuver, but Ward had no choice. We're in position, Lieutenant Kelly said, her voice tight with tension. Fire, Ward shouted. The Vanguard's main cannon fired, striking the underbelly of the Titanus with all its might. For a moment, the ship's hull held strong. But then, with a deafening crash, the blast tore through the armor, hitting the ship's core. The Titanus shuddered, its shields flickering as the core began to destabilize. We've got them, Lieutenant Harper yelled. The core's destabilizing. But just as they thought they had won, the Titanus's weapons powered up. It retaliated with an explosive barrage of energy blasts. The Vanguard was hit with several direct hits, and the ship rocked violently. Shields holding, Kelly reported, but her voice was laced with concern. We can't take another round like that. Ward's eyes narrowed as the Titanus launched a second wave of devastating fire. This wasn't a battle they could win by brute force alone. It was time for the Vanguard to pull off the impossible. "Full evasive maneuvers," Ward shouted. "Get us out of here." The Vanguard veered sharply, dodging the incoming fire by mere inches. The Titanus's weaponry fired again, but the Vanguard was already out of range. Ward took a deep breath as they put distance between themselves and the mighty flagship. "We're not done yet," Ward said quietly, "but we've given them something to think about. Let's see how they respond." The Vanguard had survived its first direct clash with the Jorian fleet, but the battle was far from over. The Titanus was still in play, and it was only a matter of time before the Jorian fleet regrouped. This war had just escalated to a whole new level, and Ward knew they were in for a fight that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The Vanguard had struck a blow, but now it had to survive long enough to land the killing blow. The final battle. The Vanguard drifted quietly through the void of space, its hull battered from the earlier clashes with the Jorian fleet. Commander Ward stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the view ahead. The Titanus, the heart of the Jorian dominion, loomed ahead, its massive form casting a long shadow over the surrounding ships. The battle had reached its climax. The Vanguard had managed to survive the first wave of attacks, but it was clear now that the real test was about to begin. Ward's thoughts were sharp and focused. The Titanus was the Jorian fleet's most powerful ship, and if they could take it down, they could break the backbone of the entire empire. But with the Jorian fleet closing in and reinforcements arriving, the Vanguard would not have long before they were overwhelmed. "We have one shot at this," Ward said, his voice low, but full of determination. "We hit the Titanus's weak spots, its power core, its lower hull, and we do it fast. We don't get a second chance." The crew nodded, their faces set with grim determination. They had already fought this far. They weren't about to back down now. "Full speed ahead," Ward commanded. "Take us in close to the Titanus. We're not going to outrun them, so we need to get up close and personal." The Vanguard surged forward, its engines pushing the ship faster as it sped toward the Titanus. The massive warship loomed larger with every passing second, its guns already charging up, preparing to unleash destruction. Ward's mind was racing, calculating every move as the battle unfolded around them. "Shields up," Ward ordered, his voice steady as ever. "Braced for impact. We're going to take a beating." The first wave of Jorian fire slammed into the Vanguard, sending shockwaves through the ship. The crew held their ground, holding onto their stations as the ship rocked violently. The shields flared brightly under the assault, but they held, absorbing the blows. "We're holding," Lieutenant Kelly reported, her voice taut with tension. "But we won't last long if they keep this up." Ward's grip tightened on the console. "We don't need long. Focus on their power core. Fire at will." The Vanguard's cannons roared to life, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts aimed directly at the Titanus's lower hull. The blasts struck with precision, sending tremors through the Jorian ship as its shields flickered and the exterior armor began to crack. "We've hit them, Commander," Lieutenant Harper reported, excitement creeping into his voice. "Their shields are weakening." "Keep pushing," Ward shouted. "We need to force them to retreat. Don't let up now." The Vanguard maneuvered in a series of tight, evasive turns, narrowly avoiding the next barrage from the Titanus. Every move they made was a calculated risk, a deadly dance as the Vanguard moved closer and closer to the heart of the enemy warship. Then, just as it seemed the Titanus was about to retaliate with a devastating counterattack, Ward's voice rang out again. "Target their engines. We're going to take them out once and for all." The Vanguard adjusted its course, taking a dangerous plunge beneath the Titanus, flying just inches above the ship's massive surface. The Jorian flagship unleashed another volley of fire, but the Vanguard was too fast, weaving out of the way with expert precision. As they passed beneath the massive ship, the Vanguard unleashed a devastating volley straight at the Titanus's engines. The blast hit its mark. The Titanus shuddered violently as its engine core exploded in a burst of light. The massive warship groaned as if in pain, and the once proud flagship of the Zorian fleet began to falter. Its weapons powered down, and its shields flickered, weak and barely functional. "We've done it," Lieutenant Harper shouted. "Their engines are down. They're crippled." But just as the crew thought they had won, an even more terrifying sight appeared before them. "We've got incoming," Lieutenant Kelly screamed. "The rest of the Zorian fleet is closing in." Ward's eyes widened. The Titanus was disabled, but the rest of the fleet was still a threat. The Zorian ships were ready to avenge their flagship, and they would overwhelm the Vanguard if they weren't careful. "Get us out of here now," Ward barked. "We've got to take out their remaining support ships before they can regroup." The Vanguard turned sharply, narrowly dodging the incoming fire from the remaining Zorian warships. The battle wasn't over yet. The fleet was still large, and the Vanguard had to outmaneuver them. Using every advantage, they had to keep the enemy at bay. "Fire on their cruisers," Ward ordered. "Focus on the weak points. Don't give them a chance to regroup." The Vanguard's cannons fired again, this time targeting the smaller Zorian cruisers. One by one, they fell, their shields cracking under the intensity of the Vanguard's blasts. The crew worked in perfect harmony, coordinating every move with precision. They knew they couldn't afford to miss. But just as the last cruiser was disabled, a new threat emerged. "The Titanus is back online," Lieutenant Kelly cried. "They've rerouted power from their backup generators. They're charging up their main weapons." Ward's heart raced. The Titanus had been crippled, but it was still alive. If it fired its main weapon at them, they would be wiped out in an instant. "We're not out of the woods yet," Ward said grimly. "Brace yourselves. We're going for one final strike." The Vanguard's engines roared as it surged forward, heading directly toward the Titanus. The Zorian flagship was powering up its main weapon, but it was slow to charge. Ward had one chance, just one, to make the final strike. With a roar, the Vanguard fired its main cannon one last time, targeting the Titanus's power core. The blast hit with a force that shook the stars themselves. The Titanus exploded in a blinding flash, its massive frame breaking apart in midair as the remaining Zorian ships began to scatter. Ward let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Target destroyed," Lieutenant Harper said, his voice full of awe. But even as the Titanus burned in space, Ward knew the victory was bittersweet. The Vanguard had won the battle, but at what cost? The Zorian fleet had been broken, but the war was far from over. "We've done it," Ward said quietly, "but this isn't over. Not yet." The Vanguard had won the day, but the battle for the galaxy was just beginning. The aftermath. The stars above the Vanguard flickered as the crew watched in awe at the crumbling remains of the Titanus. The Zorian flagship had exploded in a burst of light, its massive frame disintegrating into debris that scattered through space. The remaining Zorian ships, once so confident, were retreating, their formations broken and disorganized. The Vanguard had delivered the final blow, and the once unimaginable idea of humans standing up to the Zorian dominion had become a reality. But as the crew celebrated their victory, Commander Ward stood silently at the helm, his gaze fixed on the empty space ahead. The Titanus was gone, but the war was far from over. The Vanguard had won this battle, but the road ahead was still long. Ward knew that the Zorian dominion would regroup and strike again. This victory, while monumental, was only the first step in what would likely be a protracted war. "Commander, we've done it," Lieutenant Kelly said softly, her voice still in disbelief. "We've struck a blow against the Zorian fleet." Ward didn't reply right away. He stood still, processing the events of the past few days. The Vanguard had accomplished what seemed impossible. The crew had fought with bravery, with resolve, and with a sense of purpose that matched Ward's own. But even so, the cost of this victory weighed heavily on him. Many of the Vanguard's crew had lost their lives in the process. The scars of battle were still fresh, and Ward knew that they could not afford to let their guard down. "We've won this battle," Ward said quietly, "but the war is far from over. The Jorian Dominion won't just give up because we destroyed one ship. We've made an enemy today, and they will come back at us with everything they've got." The bridge fell silent as the crew processed his words. There was no room for complacency. They had proven themselves, but the galaxy's fate was still uncertain. "Prepare a status report for the fleet," Ward continued. "We need to call in reinforcements. This won't end with just one victory. We have to be ready for the next phase of the fight." The crew immediately got to work, sending out messages to the Human Alliance, detailing the successful operation. Ward knew it wouldn't be long before the rest of the galaxy took notice of their victory. The Jorian Dominion had been powerful, yes, but humanity had shown that even the smallest force could deliver a devastating blow to an empire that thought itself invincible. It was a message to the galaxy. Humans would not back down. They would fight for their survival, no matter the cost. As the crew worked to prepare for the aftermath of the battle, Ward stepped away from the command deck and into the quiet solitude of the observation deck. He stared out at the stars, the calm vastness of space surrounding him. Despite the victory, the toll of war had already begun to show. He thought of the lives lost, of the crew members who wouldn't be going home, and the sacrifices made for the sake of this victory. But then, as he looked out at the stars, a flicker of hope sparked within him. The Vanguard had taken down the Titanus, but more than that, it had shown the galaxy that no empire was beyond defeat. Humanity had proven that they could stand tall, even when facing seemingly insurmountable odds. Ward's eyes narrowed. There would be more battles, more enemies, and more hardships ahead. But for the first time in a long while, he believed in the possibility of victory. The Vanguard had become a symbol, not just of strength, but of resilience, and Ward knew that as long as the human spirit remained unbroken, they would keep fighting, no matter what. "Commander," Lieutenant Harper's voice cut through his thoughts. "The fleet's responding. Reinforcements are on the way, but they're asking for an update on our next move." Ward turned to face the crew member, his resolve hardening. "Tell them we're preparing for the next step. This war is far from over, and we will be ready." As the Vanguard sailed through the stars, its engines humming quietly beneath them, the crew knew that their victory against the Jorian fleet was just the beginning of something much larger. They had ignited a spark, and now it was up to them to keep that fire burning. The war for the galaxy had only just begun.